Magda Kalani report. And now welcome our guest, Jim Fitzpatrick, Member of Parliament for Popular and Limehouse, where I once lived in Limehouse, and 5 ministerial posts, 9 years Labour governments, the last one. Welcome.
Thank you.
We've just been showing our audience, who are actually international audience, and all of them familiar with the parliamentarian system.
Sure.
On the cabinet reshuffle, will Labour do reshuffle for the shadow?
Well, the position of the opposition is that they have to shadow the government. So if the government changes job descriptions or titles or restructures departments, then the opposition need to reflect that, so that if there's a minister at the dispatch box speaking, they have to have a shadow opposite them to respond and to ask questions. So it may mean there'll be some adjustments, but it won't be a reshuffle in the same way that the Prime Minister has shuffled our pack.
So at musical chairs?
A bit of that for sure, yes.
But so actually the DHS, Department of Health and Social Security, was actually a Labour a creation in the past, and then it was Labour who separated the two. Now the Conservative has actually given the Minister of Health the social. Is it a good move?
Given that most people think that the two elements of social welfare and health are so connected in terms of looking after people, particularly people in old age, and with so many pensioners occupying so many beds in the National Health Service, and the social care sector being fragmented and supposed to be underfunded, it makes sense to try and bring it together so it can be looked at holistically, so we can provide a better service to the public.
So it's actually a good move, and obviously Labour has
so,
to match. And the same thing is actually happening now with the local communities, sort of adding the housing into it and so on.
Well, housing has always been a part of the Department of Communities and Local Government, but what the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State want to do is elevate housing because of the housing crisis.
There's a new minister appointed today.
To demonstrate that it's getting more attention, more resources, specific reference within the name of the department, and new ministerial and civil servant support.
So what actually will be a Labour answer to the housing crisis, for example? I mean, there's another.
Nobody has an answer to the housing crisis other than to build more homes. And every political party in the UK is promising to build more homes. None has achieved the numbers needed so far. It'll be interesting to see if this government can do it.
So is it actually a reshuffle, or just, as we said, musical chairs?
Well, the Prime Minister has been shown to be in a very weak position because she wanted to make more radical changes than she's been able to. Some ministers bluntly refused to be moved and stayed in the positions they were in, whereas she wanted to move them. Others, like Justin Greening from Education, resigned rather than be moved. It demonstrated that the Prime Minister is weaker than most people thought that she was.
Actually, yesterday I heard on the day of the reshuffle, I heard another interpretation, which the Prime Minister might listen to reason when Jeremy Hunt argued with her. This is one interpretation.
No, indeed. And the bottom line is that apart from the Westminster bubble, among the public, I don't think anybody will be that interested. It'll be a headline they'll see. I don't think they really care who's chairman of the Conservative Party, who's Secretary of State at Housing and Communities and Local Government, who's running transport. They want the services to be run. The only person they really recognise is the Prime Minister, and she's still the Prime Minister. So it's very interesting for us, indeed fascinating for all of us interested in politics, but among the great general public, I don't think it will cause that much interest after the reshuffle is finished. They will move on to new stories.
Speaking of headlines, you actually picked up that headline, the night of the blunt stiletto, and obviously people my age remember the night of the long knife.
Yes,
Harold
indeed,
Macmillan got rid of almost 1/3 of the cabinet.
Indeed, indeed. And the night of the long knives was demonstrating how strong he was. The night of the blunt stiletto, coming from the Daily Telegraph, which is a Conservative supporting paper and ought to be giving the Prime Minister a little encouragement, that's a pretty critical headline and demonstrates that their view is that she didn't actually cut it.
Well, giving that Ishash in the kitten heels, not on the stilettos, I think it's misleading.
Well, she's famous for her shoes. So the fact that they've made the two comparisons, one, blunt stilettos against long knives, and two, shoes rather than knives, demonstrates that they're trying to keep in tune with the Prime Minister's difficulty or success.
Okay, we'll put a shoe on the other foot in the second half of that program. We'll take a break here. ابقوا معنا، نذهب إلى استراحة قصيرة نعود بعدها إليكم. شو بقى الضيف بتاعنا كان وزير في حكومة بلير بيقول إيه؟ Right, you served with Tony Blair as a minister. Okay, he was the man who took Labour Party into the successful election. Is he correct about a second referendum?
Well, there are many people in all parties who want to see a second referendum, but they, I think, are in a minority. And certainly the country voted in the referendum to leave the European Union, and no party apart from the Liberal Democrats, who are very small, is actually arguing officially for a second referendum. So Tony Blair has a very strong point of view. He's got quite a bit of support across the political spectrum. But I don't think that's an argument that's been won in general political terms yet.
But is Tony Blair's actually come back, or making a comeback, is it actually going to help Labour Party in the next election or not, given that there's a totally different move to the left and momentum and propelling Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, the Labour leadership is at odds with Tony Blair's recommendation because the Labour leadership are not calling for a second referendum. There are one or two people within the Labour Party who support that, but the Labour leadership aren't, and they are not friends of Tony Blair. So I don't think they'll be too upset that he's calling for one thing, because they want to demonstrate that they have distanced themselves from Tony Blair's legacy, and in that instance I don't think they're too worried about it.
Because your constituency mainly voted Leave, or is it small margin Leave? Or
No, they voted 2/3 for Remain.
2/3 for Remain,
yes.
Right, yeah. Okay. I was expecting them, because we've got a lot of Commonwealth people, residents in your...
well, there was a big argument among Commonwealth people, certainly the Bangladeshi community in my constituency, who were told vote Leave because that means we can shut Eastern European immigration and we can reopen Commonwealth immigration.
Yes,
but that argument wasn't won either, because people didn't believe it.
Yeah, because most London voted Remain.
Yes.
Can I ask you also, because you're a London, you were also once a London minister.
Yeah.
One problem is throughout the country, but it's actually London problem specifically, which is the acid attacks among young people.
Yes.
And there have been many retailers voluntarily stopped selling any corrosive material to the under 18s.
Yes.
And would actually Labour legalise to stop it, like cigarettes and alcohol and so on?
I think the retailers have taken their action in advance of new regulation from government. I think the government could very well have introduced a requirement for an age-related sales policy. The retailers doing it means that it's already in practice, so it may not be necessary to legislate, but if it doesn't work, I think the government and Labour would both be happy to do so.
So you will support it?
Yes.
Like also Labour is supporting the equal pay, like this row going on in the BBC.
Yes.
Although it's quite a difficult one actually, this one, because it's there's no job equivalent of Creasy's.
Well, it's very interesting, because Miss Gracie clearly feels she has a very strong case, and she has legal advice to say that the BBC are in breach of equalities legislation, are in breach of their own policy as well. And equalities politics is really is probably more important now, certainly in the UK, than it's ever been, in terms of equalities issues, in terms of equal rights, in terms of policies against sexual harassment and intimidation.
But you see, I remember actually it was the Harold Wilson government time, and when equal pay came to effect, 1976.
Yes.
We're talking about 40 years ago.
Sure.
And we still hear the same argument.
Well, I think we do hear the same argument, but I think we're now at the sharp end of the argument, because over the past 40 years, Attitudes have changed completely about the role of women in society, the right of women to have their own careers, equalities legislation for all manner of different sections in society. I think the legislation is all now in place, and what we're seeing is that legislation being built upon by individual high-profile cases coming out, whether it's equal pay, whether it's sexual harassment, whether it's discrimination, and the courts are now applying the law as it has been written and revised over the past 40 years.
But it's still a cultural thing that needs to change.
And attitudes take a long time to change.
I mean, I'm one of the dinosaurs. I still get sort of correct and sharp, and I'd mean no harm, but that.
Well, us old guys have to come to
younger
terms.
Than me.
Come to terms with 21st century society.
Well, I mean, here we are, like sort of Princess Charlotte, who is sort of the great grandchild, the youngest of Her Majesty the Queen, and now she's in line to the throne because the law changed. You also voted, the Labour voted for
yes.
Changing.
Indeed, because these are laws that were anachronistic, so they needed bringing up to modern terms. Yeah.
And we remember when before we started the program, we were talking about this change here. You know, there was appointed a panel because University Student Union were actually stopping people who disagree with their point of view, saying giving them no platform.
Yes.
But they said 2 strong members of the panel are the ones who are actually promoting the no platform. Where does actually Labour stand on this issue?
Well, I don't think there's a universal position within Labour on the issue because there are different views within all the political parties.
Yes.
Most of us want to see our universities allowing free speech and allowing people to express and articulate different views so that there is a proper open discussion and we can arrive at common sense 21st century conclusions and policies which are inoffensive to people and actually take society forward. Actually condemning or preventing people from expressing opinions is almost akin to burning books, because the minute you start restricting the ability of people to think, then you're on a narrow tramline towards dictatorship.
You know what? I've been censored by the director now and told me that's it. That's enough. Jim, thank you very, very much for coming to the program, and I'm very delighted you came. Thank you very much. And that's all what we have, and you'll see you next week. هذا كل ما عندنا، ونراكم الأسبوع الجاي إن شاء الله. ما تنسوش تتابعونا على تويتر @أديل دارويش كلمة واحدة، وعلى الفيسبوك من لندن. إلى اللقاء.